Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me.
This is the last day of Unleavened Bread. Hallelujah. And it's a high holy day, Sabbath day. And shalom to all the brethren there on Zoom that we're speaking to a live congregation today. But also shalom, Nathan Lawrence, Hoshan Rabbah, to all the people that might be watching this a little bit later on the YouTube channel. So, some of us kind of have our foot in a couple different places. I've kind of got one foot in the 21st century and one foot in about the 15th century BC. Like a lot of us who are rediscovering the ancient roots of our Christian faith. So, as I make this video, I am surrounded by some of the latest electronics. I have a MacBook Pro computer sitting here, a laptop sitting on my desk. It's fairly new. It's only about a year old. I have a brand new iPad, which I just purchased, and it's got a pencil that you can write on it. I've got an iPhone up here, which is a 12, so now they have a 13. So it's not quite the latest. And my iPad is on a gimbal, which if I move my head this way, the gimbal follows my head. And I don't know if I'll continue to use this for making videos or not, but I thought I'd experiment. But at the same time, here's a box of matzah sitting right here on my desk. Pardon me. So I've got a bunch of high-tech stuff here, and then I've got a box of matzah. Now, this matzah is not from the 15th century BC, but the concept of matzah goes clear back to about 1500 BC, to the time of Moses and the children of Israel. And some people might look at this who don't know really what this is all about and say, what on earth? What does a box of matzah have to do with anything? Okay, it's a kind of a Jewish type food, and maybe it has to do with Passover and communion, but what on earth? What is the relevance? And I want to read a scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18. 1 Corinthians 1:18. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of Elohim. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this age? Has not Elohim made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of Elohim, the world through wisdom did not know Elohim, it pleased Elohim through the foolishness of the message preached to those who believe. For the Jews request a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Messiah, Christ, crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Messiah, Christ, the power, the dunamis power of Elohim, and the wisdom, Sophia, the wisdom of Elohim, because the foolishness of Elohim is wiser than men, and the weakness of Elohim is stronger than men. This box of matzah and what it represents is wiser and is far beyond the expensive and high-tech electronics that I have sitting here on my desk. This points to something. This points to a higher reality and to a path upward that these other things don't even have a clue about. The foolishness of Elohim, the wisdom of men, quote unquote, versus the foolishness of Elohim. Or, correctly stated, the wisdom of Elohim versus the foolishness of men. For you see, verse 26, for you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But Elohim has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. And Elohim has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. And the base of the world and the things which are despised, Elohim has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. But of him you are in Messiah Yeshua, who became for us wisdom from Elohim and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, that, as it is written, he who glories, let him glory in Yehovah. So, I look at this box of matzah and what it represents with regard to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We'll talk about this here in a minute. And this is something that the church, our brothers and sisters in the mainstream church, have really most have little or no understanding of the significance of this. They have replaced this and what it represents with the traditions of men by which the word of Elohim has been made of none effect to one degree or another. They have replaced this Passover and unleavened bread and the other biblical feasts. And in their wisdom, they have built monuments and theologies and seminaries and all kinds of philosophies that have names and have libraries of books. In place of the tabernacle of Moses, they have cathedrals and basilicas and huge complexes that are worth billions in art museums. In about 2 weeks, I'm going to be in Rome. I will be going to St. Peter's Basilica. I have been there before, but my wife hasn't. When I first got there, when I was a college student in Europe, and I had a chance to travel to Rome, I went into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And this was after I'd already traveled many places in Europe, seen many cathedrals, been to Notre Dame, been to, England and other cathedrals and castles in France and elsewhere. I walked into this place and I was I'm not even a Catholic. We have no Catholic heritage in our family. I walked in there and it was so overwhelming. It was overpowering. I can feel the sensation right now. That was 43 years ago, 42 years ago. I could not, it was sensory overload. I had to sit down. I walked in partway past where St. Peter's tomb is supposed to be, and I sat down. I just sat there for an hour, absorbing the grandiosity, the art, the immenseness of this thing. And then I couldn't take any more. I left. I said, I can't absorb any more of this. I left and I went toured some other things, and came back the next day and finished my tour. That is the wisdom of men, but it's the foolishness of men. And the church system in all of its grandiosity and glory and the works of men holds nothing compared to this box of matzah and what it represents. The tabernacle of Moses was a tent. And yet the presence of Elohim was there. The Vatican Museum, which is one of the largest museums in the world, we will be going there. They have miles and miles of exhibits. Miles. The wealth. And yet the presence of Elohim was in this tabernacle. Not in Rome, but the one in the wilderness. What does that all mean? Brothers and sisters, you've been given of something very, very precious. Do not take it for granted. Do not underestimate the value of it. Because this will get you to where you want to go. That may or may not. It's what this represents. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. You can go read my articles. You can watch my videos on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They've been out there for years and years and years. But there is a bigger picture. I want to be a fool for Yeshua. And the things that this world esteems are foolishness to Yehovah Elohim. Not only are they foolishness, but they're an abomination to him. It says that in the book of James. It doesn't use that exact word, but see if I can find that here. But it says, the things of this world are anathema to him. He has no care. It's passing away. He says here, who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. This is James chapter 3, verse 13. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is pure, then peaceable, then gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy, good fruit, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That's what all of these things do not represent. That is the things I just read. This is what this does not represent. The bread that is puffed up by yeast, which we got out of our houses in preparation for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's what these things represent. All that is earthly, sensual, and devilish. The world, the flesh, and the devil. Bitterness, confusion, strife, bitter envy, self-seeking, pride. All of those things are, leaven is a metaphor for those things. And when we make ourselves flat like this bread, before Yehovah, we empty ourselves of the taint of sin, of bitterness, of strife, of arrogance. And it's a process. None of us have achieved that yet. Yeshua said in Matthew 5:48, it's translated rather poorly in our Bibles. It says, "Be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." The Greek tense there actually signifies present progressive. It's the aorist tense. Be becoming perfect. We're in the process of de-leavening our lives. As I've said so many times, the children of Israel came out of Egypt in a day, but it took them a lifetime struggling in the wilderness of life to get Egypt out of them, even after they had had a face-to-face visitation and confrontation and with the creator of the universe on Mount Sinai. They heard his voice. They heard the shofar getting louder and louder. The mountain shook. There was fire. There was an earthquake. And yet a few days later, they're having a sensual orgiastic, satanic, pagan ritual in front of the golden calf altar. That's how hard it was to get Egypt. If you go look at the videos that are taken of that golden calf altar, it shows them making graven images of Apis, of the bull, and dancing lewdly while Moses was up communing with Elohim. No, this is a process. The de-leavening process is a process. And hopefully, every year when we come back around the cycle, every year when we go back and we do the cycle of the biblical feasts, hopefully each year we get a little bit more de-leavened. It is so sad to me. The church in all of its wisdom, going back to the patristic fathers, back to the Catholic, all of these people, with their robes and their approbations of human beings and their ordinations and their credentials and their institutions and all of this man-made stuff. They think that they have a better way, and we've all been there. So don't point fingers. There, for the grace of God, go any of us and all of us. But they really think they have a better way, that they don't need this. Okay, they may do something in communion, and that's good. But they don't need this. They don't need the feasts. They think that they are at a higher level, that they don't need the teaching tools that Yehovah Elohim, the ultimate teacher, the Father in heaven, laid these teaching tools out for us to walk through every year. There's 7 steps, the 7 biblical feasts: Passover, Unleavened Bread, Pentecost, Shavuot, Day of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the Feast of Tabernacles, Hag HaSukkot, and Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day. He gave us these things because we are the children of Israel. We are walking these things out. The Israelites did these things for our learning, and they are forever. They never have been done away with, not one jot or tittle, not one yud or tagin, says Yeshua. And that the church, our dear brothers and sisters, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, of whom we are a part and have been a part, feel that they have a higher level of wisdom and understanding than those of us that are still doing this. Who are we to question the methodologies of the creator of the universe when he has given us a way to understand the deep mysteries of salvation, the deep mysteries of heaven, the deep mysteries of the level that's way above us? And we think that our stained glass, our robes, our holy water, our cathedrals, our organs, our statuary, our man-made holidays, and whatever else is part of churchianity and religiosity, that somehow that is superior. Our holy water, our holy week, our holy Maundy Thursday, our holy Ash Wednesday, our holy Friday, Palm Friday or Palm Sunday or whatever, and all the other things that we declare are holy, while we are profaning the things that the Creator called holy? Who do we think we are? Who? What arrogance, what hubris. May the foolishness of men be brought to nothing before the wisdom of Elohim. And he has chosen the foolish things of this world, you and me. I don't have any credentials. I have none except, and same with you, I am of Galilee. I'm from Hicksville, nowhere. But I have been with Yeshua, and so have you. And that's all we can claim, but that's all we need. And it has nothing to do with us. It's only by his grace. And we actually are foolish enough to believe that we might learn something by eating matzah. We might learn something about what this represents and how this should be a picture of my life before the Almighty, humbled, flattened, striped and pierced, just like Yeshua was, knowing his affliction, the fellowship of his sufferings, that through walking out his death, burial, and then his resurrection, I might find life. I might find him. Not just some head trip, but literally learning by doing what he said to do. By putting leavening out of our houses as a picture of cleaning, of getting sin out of our lives. And doing it in the spring. Not when the world says the year begins, in the middle of the winter, but when the Bible, when Yehovah said, this shall be the beginning of seasons, when the leaves are beginning to pop and the flowers, and the barley grain is coming ripe, and the almonds are beginning to bloom. This shall be the beginning of your year, O Israel. And that is a picture of rebirth, renaissance, coming alive, revival, coming out of Egypt. They're coming out of Egypt, this place of constraint, Mitzrayim, coming out of slavery, bondage, and servitude to the world, the flesh, and devil, under the blood of the Lamb, eating unleavened bread, leaving the leavening behind, getting baptized in this Red Sea unto Moses, and then trekking across what's called the Sinai Peninsula. That's a misnomer if I ever heard of one. Crossing the Gulf of Aqaba, south of the Dead Sea, crossing over to the land of Midian into the real Mount Sinai, where they met Elohim. They came out of Egypt as a as a squalling baby, as a child. They came out as a dirty and filthy. Go read it in Ezekiel 16. He says it all right here. I found you in the wilderness. You were naked. You were rejected. You were in your filth. Ezekiel 16. He says here, and this is us. Verse 1, again the word of Yehovah came to me, saying, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations, and say, Thus says Adonai Yehovah to Yerushalayim, your birth and your nativity are from the land of Canaan. Your father was an Amorite, your mother a Hittite. As for your nativity, on the day you were born, your navel cord was not cut, nor were you washed in water to cleanse you. You were not rubbed with salt, nor wrapped in swaddling cloths. No eye pitied you to do any of those things to you, to have compassion on you, but you were thrown out into the open field when you yourselves were loathed on the day you were born. And when I passed by you and saw you struggling in your own blood, I said to you in your blood, live! Live! The one who breathed life into Adam and Eve said, live! And he breathes that life into us when we come to him. Live! When we were in the world, dead in our sins, rejected, enslaved, to the world, the flesh, and the devil. And he says, verse 7, I made you thrive like a plant in the field, and you grew and matured and became very beautiful. Your breasts were formed and your hair grew, but you were naked and bare. That's when they came out of Egypt. When I passed by you again and looked upon you, indeed your time was the time of love. They're coming to Mount Sinai. So I spread my wing over you, my kanaf. That's a picture of the talit. And covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore an oath to you and entered into a covenant with you. And you became mine, says Yehovah, Adonai Yehovah. Yeah, Exodus 19, they said, I do. And between Exodus 19 and Exodus 24, they said, I do 3 times. That's a marriage covenant. And then he consummated that covenant with blood when Moses sprinkled the blood over the people in Exodus 24. Then I washed you in water. Yeah, and they were initially saved, if you will, when they on that first Passover, when they put blood on the doorpost. And then he says, I washed off your blood. Yeah, they went through the valley, or they went through the Red Sea. They were baptized. And I anointed you with oil, and I clothed you in embroidery. This is the preparation for the bride. And then it talks about how he adorned her. He said, you will become a nation of kings and priests. Exodus 19, verse 6. You are my segula, my precious treasured possession. It says that in Exodus 19. We'll talk about this in a couple days. The counting of the Omer. I'm not going to get into this today, but the 50 days of the counting of the Omer between the Sabbath, the day after the Sabbath, which falls during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, generally speaking, and 50 days forward takes us to the Pentecost or Shavuot. Empowerment, maturity, being the bride. And dear brothers and sisters, this is where we are at. We are in the process of becoming the bride for Yeshua. We're not there yet. We're still the children of Israel. And don't point your finger at the children of Israel and say, well, if I was there, I would have done a whole lot better. No, you wouldn't have, and neither would I. I was reading the other day about Yeshua after the Passover. And after the Passover, Yeshua went to the Garden of Gethsemane, as you all know. And he said, I've got to go. I'm going to be crucified. And he says, and, they're going to come. They're going to come for me. And he said, they're going to smite the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. And Peter goes, oh, Lord, even if it were, everybody else abandons you, I will not. And of course, then it says the other disciples said the same thing. He said to Peter, he said, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. You see, we think that we will do this or not do this. Look, we don't know until we get there. Unless you have been in that situation, none of us knows what we would or would not do. Thankfully, Yeshua's grace covered Peter and the rest of them. He recognized their weakness. And may y'all have mercy on us. We don't know what we will do. And we don't know what we would have done back in that ancient time. Oh, if I'd seen those miracles, I would never have, murmured or complained. If I'd seen, the Red Sea open up in front of me and the water from the rock and the waters made pure and the manna coming from heaven in the middle of the wilderness, I would never. How could those people? And yet, how many of us know people that have seen miracles happen in their lives and they've walked away? Healings, transformation of lives, greater miracles than what happened then. I mean, lives transformed, and yet people deny Yeshua and walk away. They get lukewarm. It happens. And it can happen to us. He who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. No. And even if we aren't denying Yeshua, guys, we are still murmurers. We are still complainers. We still bellyache. We still gossip. We still think wrong thoughts. We haven't gotten all of the Sior and the Kametz. The leavening, 2 aspects of leavening out of our lives. It's a process. It happens to us all. We find ourselves, look, the older I get, the more I see myself for who I am. And I haven't even begun to see anything yet. After you've had the wind knocked out of your sails a few times through life, you start to realize, I'm really not that great. I'm really not, I'm not all that I thought I was. All the great works I think I've done for the Lord, it's nothing. It's my reasonable service, if that. For all that he's done for me. It really does. And yet, it really does deflate you. But then pride can come right back. Boom, just like that. Boom, like that. Doesn't take anything from my pride. I catch myself saying prideful things all the time. Like, oh. And you guys know me well enough. I'm sure you see it pretty blatantly. Yeah, well, you work on the mote that's in your eye, or the beam that's in your eye, and I'll work on the beam that's on my own eye, and we'll all be better off. Pardon me. And then let's cover each other with grace. Love covers a multitude of sins. Some of you guys out there, whether it's on YouTube land or whether it's in the Zoom meeting, you have a problem with my little rough John the Baptist approach, or, maybe I'm not quite your cup of tea or whatever. Fine, switch the channel. I really don't care. I do care, but I don't care. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for him. And you're not paying me. So, what I mean is I'm not I'm not doing this for money, so I really don't care. But I am passionate, and I'm zealous, and sometimes, I get a little carried away. Okay, have mercy and grace. But anyway, we're still a work in progress. Let's have mercy and grace on one another. So anyway, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. This is a beautiful thing. I do think I want to read 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7 through 8. You all know it well. Poor Paul, he was so confused. I mean, this guy, he couldn't figure his way out of a paper bag, a wet paper bag. I mean, we go over here and we read in Colossians 2, verse 16, let no man judge you in food or in drink regarding a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. Now look, I'm not making fun of the Bible. I am mocking Christian leaders and teachers. And I'm reading it as in a voice where they read it, how they read it. Oh, Paul is telling us we don't have to do these things. Don't let anybody judge you. Oh, but Christ is the ultimate reality. We don't need to do those things. And like I say, poor Paul in their minds is so confused. This guy can't, he doesn't know if he's coming or going, because over here, what the church tells us he told the Colossians. Then you go over here to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. And then he tells the Corinthians, verse 7, therefore, he says, your glorying is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Of course, he's talking about the sin that was in the camp, the sin of sexual immorality that was going on there at that time. And he says, verse 7, therefore, purge out the old leaven that you may be a new lump, since you are truly unleavened. Okay, so we can spiritualize this away and say, okay, we don't really have to do the Feast of Unleavened Bread or any other biblical feast days, because, this is all a spiritual thing. Get the sin out of our lives, get the sin out of our congregations, get rid of the leavening, which sin is a biblical metaphor for. And he goes on, for indeed, Messiah is our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Oh yeah, he did it all for us. So we don't have to do it. Right? Oh, but then verse 8 comes along. Therefore, let us celebrate. That's what the word means. The feast of what? Passover and unleavened bread. He's not talking about Christmas or Easter, I can assure you. Therefore, let us keep the feast not with the old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Brothers and sisters, this is how we learn about the higher spiritual realities, by putting the sin out of our lives, by eating unleavened bread for 7 days. We learn what this malice and bitterness is that we all struggle with. It's there's two words, as I mentioned earlier, for leavening, chametz and sior. Chametz is a Hebrew word, and it means leaven, that which is leavened or bitter, and is from the root that means to be sour or to leaven. So, those of you who are culinary experts, you know that when you make bread or make pastries or cake, you put a little bit of yeast in there. Think of sourdough, and the yeast is a fungus. Yeast is a fungus. And like with sourdough, it's living, and you got to feed it sugar, and it's bubbling and all that. And then if you have yeast that's dry, it's like spores. And when you add water to it, and add it to some dough, it comes alive and begins to fester and inflate the bread. That's how you get leavened bread. It raises it up, and there's air in there, and you get this nice soft bread. When I grew up on the farm, my mom used to make bread. That's all the only bread we ever had all my life there on the farm. And she would grind the flour and knead the dough, mix it all up, let it sit, and then she would put it in some pans and and then she'd beat it down, let it grow up, and she'd do that for a few hours, and then she'd bake it in this beautiful bread. And that's what I grew up on: whole wheat bread, all organic and homemade and all that. And you can watch that process happening. And that's what sin does. It gets in and it infests, and it percolates, and it rots like fungus. Fungus is, there's different kinds of fungus. I have to deal with fungus in my tree and plant healthcare. But most fungus, it feeds on dead and decaying matter. And you have to feed it, you have to give it sugar, you have to, it many times it puffs up, it fizzles, it depending on the type of fungus. But it grows and eventually it rots things out, and that's why leavening it's sour. Sin gets in there and it putrefies, it corrupts, it inflates. Here you think, oh, I'm doing pretty good. But really, you're full of sin. That's the pride of the whole thing. That's the arrogance, being puffed up. So that's what we're to put out of our lives. That stuff. And it says here that whoever does not keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread will be cut off from Israel. Cut off is a term. You're going to be excommunicated from the camp. Now, that's not talking about if somebody just happens to go to their refrigerator and find, like I did, a bagel in there, and there it was hiding in plain sight, and we're like, whoa, how did I miss this? And we had to go toss it in the garbage halfway through the Feast of Unleavened Bread this week. No, that's if people purposely keep their sin, keep their leavening, and they don't want to repent. They will be cut off. They will be killed, because whoever dies in his sins, the wages of sin is death. He's not talking about the person that is trying to clean their life and stumbles along the way and oh no, I missed that one, and then they go to work to get rid of that. That's not what that's talking about. It has to do with the intent of the heart. But ultimately, if one doesn't get sin out of their life and come under the blood of Yeshua, it's the death penalty. You'll be cut off from Elohim. Which is what this is a picture of, cut off of Israel. The word sior is the other word. You have chametz and sior. It means leaven. It's a generic word for leaven, and this is just is the idea of they're synonyms, but chametz has the additional meaning of bitterness, and that's exactly what Paul is referring to here. Purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump. That you may be a new lump, since you are truly unleavened. For indeed, Messiah, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Thank Elohim, because I'm not perfect, and I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm trying to become perfect. And with his help, I'm becoming perfect, but I'm not there yet. Therefore, let us keep the feast not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice. That's sin, pride, hypocrisy, or chametz. That's what he's referring to. Now, this is Greek, but he's referring to these two words in Hebrew. Malice, which would be sior, and wickedness or sin, which is chametz. But with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So in other words, he wants us to walk sincerely, with a heart this purposeful intent, a heart bent in the right direction to serve him and to do the right thing and to be trying to improve and line our lives up with the word and the spirit of Elohim and with the life of Yeshua, and making progress as we go around these cycles year after year, come through these biblical cycles of the feast. We're coming up higher and higher, becoming more pure and more righteous before him. And this is what this represents: sincerity and the truth. The truth is the Torah. The truth is not just the Torah, but the whole Torah of Elohim's word from Genesis to Revelation. So this really is the wisdom of Elohim. He knew what he was doing when he asked us to do these things. And these are the ancient paths that we are coming back to. These are the ancient paths, the roots of our faith. Malachi talked about those that would come in the last days, preparing the way for Messiah, who would help turn the hearts of the children back to the fathers and back to the ancient paths. And you all know that scripture that talks about, let's go back to the ancient paths that are good, the ancient paths of Torah. And that's in it's in Jeremiah here. Was it verse chapter 9? Here it is. No, that's another one. You know the one I'm talking about. Here it is. Jeremiah 6. Verse 16, stand in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths, where the good way is, and walk in it. And then you shall find rest for your souls. I don't know about you, but I'm getting weary of this crazy world. I need some rest. Yeshua is my rest. And when I walk in his ways, I find that rest and I find that joy and I find who I am in him. And it's a beautiful thing, because this is the trajectory that points us forward. All right. I hope this was a blessing to somebody, and may you rejoice as you go forward in your walk, upward, spiraling cyclically, following the biblical patterns as we go onward and upward through Yeshua the Messiah. Amen. Shalom.
Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good,